Good morning. My first guest this morning is Ms. Maureen McTeer, the wife of the former Prime Minister of Canada, and I'm sure she hopes to be the wife again of the same man as Prime Minister of Canada. But I suspect that she's not here to talk politics. She's here to talk about houses she has lived in, the grace and favour houses of the high and mighty in Ottawa, and her book called Residencies. My instant inclination, interviewing Maureen McTeer, the wife of the former Prime Minister of Canada, is of course to launch into a political diatribe. Will you get into politics with me at all, Maureen?
Only as it concerns the book.
Only as it concerns the book.
That's right.
Next question to get it out of the way. Have you taken any notice of some of the nasty, if not shabby, remarks made about your handling of the official residencies by another author who shall remain nameless?
No.
And you won't comment about that either?
That's right.
So what are we going to talk about this morning?
Well, we're not talking about politics. We could talk about law.
Law.
We could talk about the book.
You are, of course, a lawyer. We could talk about the book. We could talk about what I call these grace and favour houses.
Yes.
Now, you're well qualified. Why to talk about these three houses?
Because I did my homework. I did my research, and I lived in all the three houses, so it gives a rather different look at the insides.
24 Sussex Drive, and for which you lived in a short but presumably happy 9 months.
Certainly short.
Certainly short, and presumably happy. Politically, you were happy at that particular time, I'm quite sure.
Well, politically, it was good for Joe.
It was tough. Tell me about Sussex Drive. First of all, when you moved into Sussex Drive and decided to change the furnishings and whatnot, do you, as the Prime Minister's wife, have a blank check to do as you wish, to remove other furnishings and put in yours?
Well, there are certain pieces of furniture that are already there, and I think one of the things that we had tried to do when we went in was I worked with two architects, Cecilia Humphreys and Maureen Lonergan, her sister, who were both architects from Manitoba, one living in Ottawa. We had gone in and decided that one of the things we would like to do, or one of the things I really wanted to do, was make it a showplace of Canadian things. So we began to, on the first floor, do the history of Canada, if you will, through sculptures and art and furnishings, books and that kind of thing. So that's how we began to proceed. And so we tried to integrate what we had as our own private things, our own pieces of art, and our own furniture, with what was there. And then from that, we decided what we needed.
Tell me about Sussex Drive, though. How long has it been there? I've been there once for a very stilted formal dinner, way back in the days when Lalonde was a mere office boy. No kidding. And Pearson was the Prime Minister.
That's right.
And it struck me it's not a terribly impressive house as you walk in the front door. Is it really?
Well, I guess a lot depends on I like to think that a house gives off a feeling of the residents that are there, so that when you come in to a house, you can have an idea just what type of people are living there, whether they're warm, whether...
And how did you leave it? What type of people?
How did we leave it?
Yes.
I think we left it with that kind of feeling. We tried to treat, it's a very elegant home, we tried to treat it with the elegance it deserved, but also to have certain types of artwork, sculptures, and so on that really reflected us.
Who first lived in 24 Sussex?
It was built in 1867 for a lumber baron, who was the first member of Parliament for the riding of Ottawa when Canada became a country in 1867.
Probably cost about $20,000 at most.
15.
I wasn't far out, was it?
Yes, no, you weren't. He built it as an engagement gift to his third wife. His first two wives died very tragic deaths, and 3 of his small children had died of scarlet fever in 10 days of each other.
What was his name?
Joseph Merrill Currier, an American by birth, who had come and made his fortune in the lumber industry. And he gave it to his third wife on condition that it would be built on a cliff overlooking the water and the trees that had made his fortune, and that it would be called Gorfisfa, which is a mispronunciation of the Welsh word, which means resting place, or more literally, place of peace. So we
Give me that again.
Oh, don't ask me to spell.
Yeah.
Gorfisfa is how I pronounce it.
Gorfisfa.
Yeah. No S.
No S. Gorfisfa.
Yeah.
So there we have 24 Sussex Drive. Is it a happy house?
I think it is, when we go into places, we like to make them our own place, our own space, if you will. It's the only private place that people in public office have, so they become quite private as well as public places. It's the continual dichotomy, I suppose, of public versus private. And they're happy. They've had a lot of sad things happen. They've had a lot of happy things happen.
Tell me some of the sad things that happened.
Oh, you're a really...
I'm a gossip.
Well, the man in Ottawa last week asked me which I would like to be laid out in, which I thought was a rather interesting way of looking at the houses. Which one did you like the best? Which one would you like to be buried
You
from?
mean to be laid out in your coffin?
That's right.
What a ghoulish question.
Well, it's the same kind of question you're asking me. You're asking me about
I didn't ask you
sad
wanted to be laid out in your coffin in any one of these houses. No.
No.
But it gives, sometimes a house has got a particular atmosphere about it because of tragedy or happiness.
Well, certainly when the house was expropriated by the government in 1943 without any reason given, it was a very sad time for the man who lived there. He fought it in the courts for 6 years and died 6 months after the decision.
Oh, it only
So that
became
was
the
very
official
sad.
prime minister's official
1950.
residence in 1950.
Yes.
I didn't
Yes.
know that.
And he, needless to say, was very upset. They said it was for commercial purposes they needed to have the house. So Mr. Saint Laurent was the first prime minister to live in the house in 1950.
Old Uncle Louis.
And as you can see from the pictures, the house was completely gutted and redone for the prime minister. And people around him, including his family, insist that he only accepted it because it was presented to him as a fait accompli, which adds again to the mystery of why it was expropriated in the first place if the prime minister of the day didn't even want it.
How big a family can live there? How large are the servants' quarters?
It depends how many
Kids
you want to
you've
put
got.
in a room.
No, servants' quarters. Vast servants' quarters?
Yes, it's a substantial house, very large house by anyone's standards, I think.
From an intimate point of view, though, would you not rather live in the official opposition residence at Stornaway?
Well, I quite like Stornaway for personal reasons. It's a place I've lived most of my married life. My daughter was born there. A lot of things have...
You're an old married woman now, aren't you?
Oh, I am.
How many years?
10 next year.
10 next year.
Yeah, 11 for Joe, because he was in Japan for one of our anniversaries, and since he celebrated it twice,
So he's a day ahead of you?
No, he insists he's a whole year ahead of me.
So that's 10 years married, and you're not shy about your age, are you?
No, I'm proud to be 30.
And Joe must be
I've
what?
earned every gray hair on my head.
Joe must be what, 45 now?
43.
43.
Yes.
Now,
Don't-
Stornaway, a little background on Stornaway. I know nothing about
Stornaway?
it except it's the name of an island off the west coast of Scotland
That's
where
right.
it always rains and blows hurricanes.
Yes, well, that's... I didn't realize about the climate, but that's exactly where
Appalling
it is
climate.
from. Apparently, it's the name of a town on the Isle of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides.
Right.
The Pearlie Robertson family, who were the second owners of the house was built in 1914 for a dry goods merchant, whose son actually, one of his 3 sons, was the Member of Parliament for Argenteuil-de-Montagne, which is now Francis Fox's riding. And one of his sons was killed on the St. Croix when it was sunk in the war.
Oh, destroyer.
Yes, and the other son now lives in Montreal. But it was the Pearlie Robertsons, the Pearlies rather, were from the Isle of Stornaway.
They were from
So they called it Stornaway after their ancestral home.
Lewis, the Isle of Lewis,
Isle of
isn't
Lewis,
it?
yes. Apparently Stornaway is a place on the Isle of Lewis.
Yeah, Stornaway's the fishing
town,
village
or-
capital,
yes.
where a man called Leverhulme once tried to force the locals into activity by a fish plant, soap factory. And they just put him in Coventry, refused to speak to him, and the wreck, or rather the old buildings still stand there because the men of Lewis would not work for an Englishman who came from south of the border.
I see.
More with Maureen McTeer and her book, Residencies. You could have got a better title.
I had a better title.
What was it?
Some have called them home.
And Prentice Hall decided to call it Residencies.
Their prerogative.
Their prerogative. For $24.95, they could have got a brighter title. Maureen McTeer after the break. Before we talk about Harrington, which is what, the official summer residence?
Country residence, yes.
Country residence. Another huge place.
Beautiful place.
I want to know, Maureen McTeer, why none of these public residencies are in fact open to the public,
That's
as
one
I
of the
recall, at any time whatsoever.
Well, that's not quite true. Mrs. Pearson had a Canadiana room that she collected pieces from all across Canada for 1967. The house was then open to the public for certain types of guided tours, mainly the Canadiana room itself. They're not really houses that are built for public, and they are the only places in the world where the people can be there, private, alone, and live their own lives.
But just not big enough, perhaps.
No, and
were you never
now
tempted?
there's a security problem as well, which
oh,
I think
of course
is,
so.
which
But were
is,
you never tempted in these quieter days to open the Canadiana room to the public yourself?
Well, the Canadiana room was dismantled when the Trudeaus redecorated, so it's not there.
But you were
anymore.
saying that you brought back some Canadiana.
Well, what we did was we tried to use the first floor to have the history of Canada depicted.
How is it depicted? In pictures only, or are there any
No.
old artifacts?
A lot of artifacts.
Such
we had
as?
dinosaur bones from the Badlands of Alberta, for instance, which we had mounted, and we had Eskimo art, Indian art, Inuit works. We had all kinds of things. The formal den on the first floor was given over to the first Canadians, if you will, the first settlers.
No current what's that word? Memorabilia.
Yes.
No current memorabilia. Like Johnny MacDonald's quill
We
pen.
had Sir Johnny MacDonald's clock, actually,
His
in
clock.
the dining room. Yes, we had a lot. We had an amazing number of pieces that were loaned to us. We had the original B&A Act in Sir Johnny's hand on an écritoire in the formal living room.
On a which?
An écritoire, you know, it's a desk at which people used to
Oh,
write.
yes. Écritoire.
Yes.
Your French is better than my French. I can only
You
understand.
don't use it as much.
No, I can understand it when spoken by Joe.
I see.
And I take it
Oh,
dreadfully.
he'll take that as a compliment.
No, it's not a compliment, really, because if I can understand somebody's
Well,
French,
then you'll have to phrase it so it is a compliment.
I can understand Joe's French, which means that I can't understand René Lévesque, but I can understand
They have a
Joe's
different
French.
style.
Écritoire.
Yes.
How's that?
Very well. Very, very good.
Écritoire. Not too bad, is it?
No.
For an old slob of a Scotch Canadian. Tell me about Harrington Lake. How much does that cost us poor taxpayers a year to give you and the likes of you
Actually-
a summer residence with your fleet of limousines and your dozens of
yes.
horses and carriages standing by there to cater to your every need?
Yes, it's really a great life. Oh, yeah. Harrington Lake was originally expropriated. Well,
Another one.
it was expropriated by was sold to the government actually by the Edwards family, who owned it, and William Harridge, who was R.B. Bennett's brother-in-law. They owned it 2/3, 1/3. For a long time, it was just used by the FDC, as it was then, the National Capital Commission, as it is now, just to let out to people on first-come, first-served basis. The Special Committee of the House and the Senate had decided that they would build there a complex similar to the Château Lake Louise complex and in Alberta. But the chairman of the FDC at the time wanted it to be a less public place, so decided that what he needed was a public place without the people. So he thought, well, perhaps we could make it a country place for the Prime Minister of the day, and it fell well because the Prime Minister just elected was John Diefenbaker, who didn't have a country home and who enjoyed fishing, and the caretaker with whom I spoke was directed by the chairman to take Mr. Diefenbaker fishing and to be sure that he caught a trout. And he did, and the next year the place, under the Official Residence Acts, was made the country home of the Prime Minister of Canada.
So it was John who bought it, really, for the use of Prime Ministers?
Well, it was already owned by the government. It's just it became used exclusively as a prime ministerial place in
Nice place?
1950. It's beautiful.
Did you redo it as well?
No. It's a very rustic place, and I suppose had we stayed longer, we probably would have had some of the furniture recovered or things like that.
When you go back again...
Yes.
To these,
you want to come as a guest?
No, I don't want to come.
Because you've never been there.
No. I don't like...
You don't like coming as a guest? You'd love it. It's beautiful.
Harrington Lake, there's
You
no
would love
golf
it.
course.
No, there isn't.
And I don't fish.
There's one nearby. If you came in the
one?
winter, you could go skiing.
No, I'd break my legs if I went skiing.
Cross country, you could cross country.
No. But I was saying, when you
You could
return...
toboggan.
Could sit by the fireside and have a dram.
That's right.
When you go back,
Yeah.
eventually, as I'm sure, you're confident, of course, that you're going back.
Well, we're certainly working towards that.
From Stornaway to Sussex Drive in Harrington Lake. Do you plan more changes?
I think we would probably follow some of the same themes, but we're very different people now. We are, in a way, we've matured. We've been through a lot of things, and I have very definite ideas. I think my appreciation of Canadian art has increased, and I think Cecilia and Maureen, my two architect friends, are always full of ideas and suggestions. I think we would
So
probably
even now,
do
as
well.
you sit partially in the political wilderness, you're scheming and dreaming
No, I'm
of
not.
changes that you'll make to
It's funny,
Harrington and Stornaway.
no, I didn't then, and I don't think I think one of the things that you learn quite early on in politics is that you never even consider that the chicken is going to have an egg, let alone that it might hatch someday.
It might drop on the floor and be all over the place.
That's right.
Well, Maureen, I sometimes have the feeling that you're not shy, obviously, but you don't push yourself into the spotlight very much, do you? Are you basically, like me, a shy
We're both
person,
very shy, retiring people.
covering up our sensitivity by this apparent brashness on occasion?
Well, I think I've got mine more under control than you do, but
An unkind cat. Maureen McTeer, nice to meet you. When's the election going to be?
oh, you're asking the wrong person. There's a couple going on today, actually.
I know. Well, they should be very intriguing elections,
Yes,
and may well
they
help
should
to
be.
decide the political future
Oh, I
of the
don't think
country.
so. Well, probably. New Brunswick, you mean?
New Brunswick could be quite a thing. Broadbent, what's that? No, Bill, what's Ray's riding again?
Broadview, Greenwood,
Broadview, Greenwood, and what's the other one?
and Leeds, Grenville, and Temiskaming.
Well, if there were a Tory swoop, you would certainly make you very pleased, would it not?
Oh, yes, it would be great.
My thanks to Maureen McTeer and her book, which should have been called Some Have Lived There, but
Some have called them home,
some have called them home,
but is called,
residencies,
right, Homes of
and
Canada's
costs
Leaders.
are modest.
$24.95 and no sales tax on books.
Why no
apparently.
sales tax? So on
Apparently
books?
I was surprised too.
When are you going back to practice law?
Hopefully in the new year
Oh, where?
in Ottawa.
In court?
Well, I'd like to do administrative law.
Administrative law?
Yes, probably a federal court.
A backroom person? Oh, can you take a job like that as a
I
wife?
promised Joe that I would never plead before judges that he's appointed. Other than that, I don't see too many problems. I would certainly not do anything that involved a conflict of interest for him.
So, but administrative law in a back room would be ideal for you.
Well, provided I had a front office.
How's Catherine?
She's started to school.
She must be how old now?
5.
5. Just the one.
Brownies, piano, the whole song.
Planning to have a larger family?
I have one perfect child.
Good. My thanks to Maureen McTeer. Give my regards to Mr. Clark.
I certainly will.
I'm looking forward to seeing him here again so we
To
can
practice your French.
Écritoire. My thanks to Maureen McTeer.